Hello guys, what's going on? My name is... Wait, no, that doesn't matter. Today I actually wanted to talk about adding some events to the first 6 years of Unsung Remnant. Addendums, if you will. So we're going to actually start with the first of the addendums to the timeline. I wanted to add these changes because I noticed that there were some major events that I believe would have happened during the first 6 years that I just either forgot to talk about, didn't add, or was just too lazy to go into detail about. So the first of these addendums actually takes us to the third month of the first year ATW, where we see the end of the Mistral Empire. So my reasoning behind this, I wanted to add this because, going back and watching World of Remnant, where I get a lot of my information on the Great War, Mistral had an empire. They had an emperor. So that means that whenever the King of Vale won, they essentially deposed the emperor of the government. And that made it so that every country had a council in charge of its country or something like that. So let's get started. In conformance with the Treaty of Vale, the Mistral Empire would host its first General Assembly, which would see the end of the empire. The new government would call for elected officials instead of imperial law. The new elections were set to be held later that year, while some of the senators would actually serve as interim councilmen during the transition. The Emperor of Mistral and the imperial family were removed from political power. The imperial family would become a figurehead with mainly ceremonial powers. During the transition, the interim government would be established, which many senators of the empire would become temporary council members until the first voting season. Many feared what the sudden change in government would mean for the country, and the fragile state of the government led to one of the sharpest economic downturns in Mistral history. Alright, so that takes us to the second addendum I wanted to talk about, which actually takes place on the 8th month of the first year ATW. And the reason I wanted to add this one is I'm sure there would have been a lot of disputes over land even after the war and after the treaty had been signed. Of course, the nation's rulers would have had to have agreed as to what land is owned by which country, but that doesn't mean that the people who live in that land agree. So think about this. The war lasted 10 years, and during that time, some land would have been annexed by other nations. The Florentia Isles dispute is going to be one such almost casualty of the treaty. Well, anyways, let's get into it. After signing the Vital Treaty, national borders were redrawn. The Florentia Isles was one of the highest points of contention for the nations of Vale and Mistral. The Florentia Isles is a grouping of small islands off the east coast of Faunus, in the same region that started the Great War. However, unlike the other settlements, the Florentia Isles was home to both Mistrans and Valians. The two people mixed in a peaceful cohabitation thanks to the progressive rule of Mistran governor Kyoko. The Florentia Isles cohabitation was going so well that it served as the main reason the King of Vale originally believed that the land could be shared between Vale and Mistral. Even during the war, Kyoko protected the Valian people in the city and even married a Valian woman and had a family of 5. However, the redrawn borders would mean Valians would now rule the land and the Mistrans would most likely be forced to return to Mistral. This fear would come to pass, as in accordance with the treaty, Mistral recalled all their citizens, giving them 6 months to comply. Protests broke out as new Valian governors were sent from Vale to replace Kyoko during the transition of power. In response to this, the people of the Florentia Isles actually formally requested independence, claiming that they were not Mistran or Valians anymore. The cultures of the two people mixed, creating a new individual nation. The 10 years that they spent together merely cemented the change. The King of Vale was fearful that his inaction would lead to a repeat of the war, so he decided it would be best to not allow Florentia to actually recede from the kingdom. He sent troops to the Florentia Isles to aid in the transference of power. Mistral would also send troops, but to ensure the safety of their citizens. When the two opposing sides arrived at the Florentia Isles, they were blown away at the new, blended culture. The position of Mistral would change. They believed that the people of Mistral that were there should be allowed to remain. Mistral backed the proposal for the Florentia Isles to gain some autonomy. The King of Vale would eventually rescind his decision to fully reclaim Florentia Isles, allowing them to become a city-state. To celebrate the victory of statehood, the new naming tradition began, which children would be named after colors. The creative idea spread throughout the world as a form of self-expression, especially in the creatively repressed Mistral. The idea became so prominent that many people of the modern era think that the naming tradition, as it became known, was created because of the end of the Great War, not knowing the true origin. So honestly guys, the next thing I wanted to talk about was something I just completely forgot about, and that was the Vital Festivals. Alright, so as you know, the Vital Festivals were the celebration of the end of the Great War. The festivals took place every 2 years or semi-annually or biannually, however you say that in wherever part of the world you're from. But this would of course mean that the tournaments would also be hosted by the Huntsman Academies. Of course, all of the academies would have to exist at the time. So, on the 7th month of the 4th year AGW, we see the first Vital Festival tournament held. So after the founding of the final Huntsman Academy, the headmasters announced that there would be a tournament hosted between the school's best and brightest. The Vital Festivals would serve as a celebration of the people's ability to come together and evolve. The first Vital Festival tournament was held in Vital with 40 participants. The tournament was run in traditional brackets and there was no team contest as huntsmen and huntresses at the time were not trained in teams. And that takes us to the final Addendum, which takes place only a few months later on the 10th month of the same year. A Coles Bank Company boat suddenly sunk off the coast east of Vacuo, which led to the deaths of 24 crewmen. Mantle accused Vacuo for sinking the vessel. Since Vacuo was still facing a government restructuring, there was no affirmative answer as to what happened to the vessel. While the Shade's headmaster, Arsha Cobalt, would confirm that the Huntsman Academy was not involved, no further statements could be made. Tensions between the two nations would continue to rise, as it was believed that Vacuo should be held accountable for the deaths of the crewmen on board, and the act of aggression could not be excused due to the nation's poor government structure. Things would only settle down after William Wilbur, the only survivor, was found adrift in a lifeboat. As it turns out, the ship sunk due to someone smoking around unstable and explosive dust that was being transported on board. So guys, that's all I have for you today. If you like the timeline so far, please hit the thumbs up. Subscribe. I'm a new channel, so it's cool to see some growth. I'm going to be working on the timeline throughout the week. So if you have any ideas on some events you think would be fun or interesting, feel free to leave a comment below. You can also follow me on Twitter at Revoked Studio or on any social media, I guess. I'll leave a link in the description. I will be making a Discord at some point, eventually. So if you're curious about the channel name, you can see the explanation video on the left, or watch the part 1 of this timeline on the video on the right. Alright guys, well you have a good one. I'm out.